Yeah, I'm actually starting to get hungry myself. All right, text me please. All right, what's your last? Love you.
Working out the kinks here. All right, you guys ready? So, hello and welcome everyone to this is our first in-person and live event, and we're so excited to be hosting TJ and Lori. We're super excited. I'm Javier Ramirez. I co-run Exile and Bookville with Kristen Gilbert, who's running the important stuff downstairs for visitors to talk to. But yeah, we're on Chicago's Mission W Fine Arts Building. We're doing this a live event. We're also broadcasting it virtually for those who couldn't make it. So it's a first for everyone here. Thank you guys for showing up. We are so thrilled to host TJ Newman for her new book, Falling. TJ flew into Chicago just for this event, and we are so incredibly honored. Joining TJ tonight is Exile VIP, yes you are, Lori Rader-Day. TJ Newman, a former and forever bookseller turned flight attendant, worked for Virgin America and Alaska Airlines from 2011 to 2021. She wrote much of Falling on cross-country red-eye flights while her passengers were asleep. She lives in Phoenix, Arizona. Falling is her first novel. Congratulations, TJ. Lori Rader-Day is the Edgar nominated with the Anthony Award and Mary Higgins Clark Award-winning author of The Lucky Mountain. Her new book, Death at Greenway, releases in the fall, and we couldn't be more excited for it. With copies of Falling by TJ and The Lucky One by Lori around here in the hallway, should you guys choose to buy some copies? Thank you. We ship nationally, so shoot us an email and give us a call to order the books. Enjoy the event and stick around after for the signing and conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, see if you can hear me. It's pretty good, right? I'll just hold it. So I just finished reading Falling with a sense of dread and anxiety that I cannot quite explain to you. Some of you, I think, some of these airline professionals who are lining the room to see TJ today will understand what I mean, because I think I heard some of them say they already finished it. It's airplane reading if you're really confident about air traffic control and your place in the world. So I am super interested in your journey to the publication of this book. So let's start with, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, short answer, yes.
Okay.
Lifelong reader, lifelong writer, lifelong dreamer of being a published author. And it was when I spent some time as a bookseller, like you said, that dream of being a published author became a concrete goal. Something about being in the bookstore, surrounded by books every day, talking about books, just made me realize that it was a community that I wanted to be a part of in a very real and concrete way. And I intended actually to stay at the bookstore and to do just that, stay surrounded by books and maybe work my way up to manager, maybe, be a buyer or something like that, maybe then work into publishing, while still working on my own writing. And then the opportunity to fly came up, and as the daughter of a flight attendant and the sister of a flight attendant, it was an opportunity that I just knew I couldn't pass up. So I left the bookstore to fly.
That was, you left the bookstore to fly.
But I came back. It's a full circle moment. I came back.
Well, that was my next question was how did you become a flight attendant? But it sounds like it's in your DNA.
Exactly. It's in my DNA. Yeah. I grew up in the industry and knowing how it worked and knowing the flexible schedule. And I knew that I would be able to also continue to pursue writing while I flew. So yeah.
Did you also love to travel? Is that one of the factors? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. definitely was one of the factors. And when Virgin America, the airline that I flew with, like when the opportunity to fly with them, I knew it would be the perfect fit. And so that's why I pursued it.
We have a little feedback. Stand by. It's my mic and her mic.
Here, I can pull mine off too. See if we can both.
Just want to like hold up when you're talking a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the rest of the time.
Thank you, sorry.
No, it is great.
We're learning.
Yes.
We are learning. And then when you're talking, lean in to the camera. There.
I'll just make
Make sure the people can see who's talking. Hello, people. So where did this idea start for you? Where were you when you thought this is the idea? I want to talk about this.
Can I was gonna say also, can you guys just
Yeah.
hear us?
Yeah.
I wonder, can they hear us?
If we shut off one of these and
Oh, share it? We can do that or
Yeah,
also.
yeah, we'll take this.
Thank goodness we're
Thanks
all,
for your patience.
yeah, 2020, 21, used to this kind of, oh, there we go.
we're all learning together.
That's
Okay.
better.
Okay, let's see. Let's open the chat here.
So the question was, where did the idea for this?
Out here? Yeah, back here. Okay. The question is,
Waiting for like, the cat to walk in and the background or the kids to come in just for like the complete.
hey, crime writers don't mess around with cats, right?
Right.
That is what these people are waiting for. The question is, where did this story begin for you?
So the idea for Falling, the concept for the book came to me at work. I was working a red eye because that's what I love. They're my favorite flights. They're quiet, they're calm. Everybody goes to sleep, and then I could do my own thing, which was to write this book. But before I got to that point, I was working a red eye, and I'm standing at the front of the cabin, and I'm looking out into the aircraft at the sleeping passengers, and it's dark and it's cold and it's quiet, and I have this thought that their lives, my life, my crewmates' lives, all of our lives are in the hands of the pilots. And it was the first time that I'd had sort of like the flip side of that bargain come to mind, which is that this idea that with that much power and responsibility, how vulnerable does that make a commercial pilot? And I couldn't shake the thought. And so several days later, it had kind of solidified into a concrete scenario. And I was working a different trip with a different set of pilots. And I just said to the captain that I was with that day, hey, what would you do if your family was kidnapped and you were told that if you didn't crash the plane, they would be killed? What would you do? And the look on his face, I mean, it terrified me. I mean, it said everything. He didn't say anything because his face said everything. He was terrified because he did not have an answer. He didn't know what he would do. And that was the moment that I knew I had a book to write.
Story. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the writing. You said that you were writing during red eyes, which I find startling. Who likes a red eye flight? Nobody. No, not the flight attendants. There's a whole bank of flight attendants here. They love, you know why they love it? Because we're asleep and we aren't asking for anything and we're not bitching about anything, right? Yes. Okay. So where did you start? Like, how did you start writing, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, I started, there's a scene in the cockpit where the Captain Bo Hoffman, sort of discovers the predicament that his family is in. And that was the first scene that I wrote, because it was the only thing I had. I didn't have anything. I didn't plot this out. I didn't plan it ahead of time. I literally just started with the only thing that I knew, which was the concept of the book, and then wrote the characters into and out of their problems, which I later discovered in the revision and editing process is a lot more, it makes you, the editing process a lot more difficult when you're writing a plot-centered book to do no plotting ahead of time.
Who told you that?
I told myself that every day. It was like, good job. You could have made this a lot easier if you'd have thought about
But
it first.
you're new, so you're new to public. Do you know what that's called?
Tell me what,
Okay, so it's called being a pantser,
yes.
riding by the seat of your pants.
Yep.
I am also that person.
So you're a pantser too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, I am. And it does actually make a lot of trouble for the editing process. Javier is not here, not touching the things in front of us. Not here at all. But you're right, it does maybe make more work at the end. So you're either a person who's plotting or you're doing the work up front.
Right.
And maybe it saves you time. I don't know. I don't know if I could do
You
it.
don't think that it does?
Are you thinking about doing plotting for your next book? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what's so fascinating is, so I was fortunate enough to get a 2-book deal. So I'm currently working really hard on my second book. And it's been a really fascinating process to see what I'm changing up and from the first time I did this to now. So some things are sticking, some things are changing, and it's a whole new learning process.
Could be different every time.
Could be different every time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. So what kind of research did you have to do? Thank you. What kind of research did you, I mean, I know you lived some of the research clearly. Was there any part of the story that you're like, I have to go ask somebody, or I have to read a book about this, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important research that I did for the book, honestly, was showing up to work with my eyes and ears open and asking a lot of questions. I wonder now that it's out here and that it's a thing, that if the pilots that I flew with are kind of putting 2 and 2 together as to why I was asking so many questions. I think they just thought that I was like really curious about flying and really had a lot of, and if you know pilots, it's almost impossible to get them to stop talking about flying. So it was actually a very easy research process in that way, because it was just, they were constantly just telling me what I needed to know. So the research mainly was done at work like that, but at a certain point, I'm on the other side of the cockpit door. There's only so much that I can research and assume, and I had to get people on the other side. So I did have several trusted pilot friends read early drafts of this manuscript to tell me, you know, where I was accurate. No, we would never say that. No, that's not how that flow goes, you know, so to make sure that I was, you know, doing it accurately.
For some reason, I just had the picture of you like taking a tour of the cockpit and getting the little wings, like the little kids do. Yeah.
And to ask to wear the hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As part of your research.
I definitely, when we would have, like, you know, we'd get to the plane earlier, we'd be on a delay or something, we'd have downtime. I definitely would always be up front in the cockpit asking, oh, what does this do? And what is that? So, yeah.
I love the idea of the pilots you're working with being like, she is so interested in me and our work. Wow.
And I was, that's
What a
very
dedicated
sincere.
flight attendant.
That's also very sincere. I was genuinely interested. I also just had very specific reasons for asking
And then you're
specific
like-
questions too. Yeah, and then I would constantly, you know, grab a cocktail napkin and scribble down my notes so that I wouldn't forget it later. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that surprised me in the book was the concept of flight attendants, and this is not a spoiler, I think, being sort of a line of defense, protecting the passengers. I think a lot of passengers, and in the book, a lot of the passengers are sort of seeing the flight attendants as, you know, airborne wait staff. And you make very clear, nuh-uh, that is not true. This is what it really is. Well, I have a quote from the book. So one of the main characters is Joe, who's a longtime flight attendant. Anybody here think that they're Joe? Yeah. Ma'am, are you Joe? No, oh, okay. No, she's great. You could be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I would claim that. Longtime flight attendant Joe says to a very new flight attendant who offers to take care of all the cabin service while the more seasoned pros figure out how to save the plane. Joe says, that's not our job. Service is just something we provide. So tell us a little bit about the training that you had to do this real job, the defense of passengers. This is interesting.
Yeah, I think that there is a very common misconception in the public that flight attendants are on board for service and service alone. We're there to bring you a drink. And I promise you, if that was the case, they would have replaced us with vending machines a really long time ago. We are there for safety and security, period. That's what flight attendants are there for. We go through a rigorous training regimen, initial training, and then we do annual recurrent training every single year. We're there studying, you know, hazmat and fire, you know, what to do in a fire and how you fight different types of fire. I mean, that is what we are there to do. I think people also don't realize that once the cockpit door closes, it's you. A pilot's duty is to maintain and protect the airframe, the aircraft. It is the flight attendant's duty to protect the passengers. Once that door closes, it's the passengers and it's the flight attendants. And I'm really grateful, and it's been so wonderful to see that response to this story. I mean, like, I wrote this book just because I wanted to tell a fun story, and I wanted people to go on a fun ride, and I wanted to
Never fly again.
and that, you know, I wanted a 90s blockbuster, you know, big thriller, you know, just fun escape. And to hear people also say, in addition to that, I never knew the flight attendants did so much and that they had that kind of training, and it has increased my respect for the role of the flight attendant. That is, I'm so grateful to provide a counter narrative to the way that flight attendants are more typically portrayed in other artistic forms.
Let's see. Not sure the order of these questions here. So Joe, apparently I'm a fan of Joe.
She's my favorite character too. I know you're not supposed to choose favorites of your children, but she's my favorite character.
She's a good child to think of as a favorite. Absolutely. So Joe later organizes the passengers and thinks to herself, a flight is just a random sample of the general population, a classic bell curve, a few assholes and a few exemplars, but primarily a whole bunch of sheep. Uh-oh, what's this? So I'm guessing that's what flight attendants are really thinking about us. As passengers board the plane, are flight attendants assessing us to see where we fit on the curve? What's the most common problem you spot as people board a flight?
Flight attendants are trained to observe every passenger as they board the aircraft. Yeah, we're constantly having situational awareness of what's going on. And we practice also something called CRM, which stands for Crew Resource Management, which basically boils down to the concept of communication. So if I'm standing at the front during boarding and I see a passenger come on and something just doesn't seem right, you know, she's doing something that just seems off, I'm going to watch her, and then maybe before we take off, you know, I'm going to call her back and I'm going to say, hey, you know, the woman, you know, in the red hat in row 14, was there anything? And maybe that flight attendant that says, yes, she said the weirdest thing. She said this. So then when the gate agent comes on, I'm going to say, hey, the woman with the red hat, was there anything at the gate that happened? Yeah, actually, you know, when I said this, then she did. Now, my thing alone is just a hunch, but now we've communicated, and now we see there's a lot of smoke. We might actually be dealing with a fire here. So that's what flight attendants are trained to do constantly. And for the purposes of this book, it actually worked out great in that, like, I basically, you know, was paid to sit around and people watch and do character research. I'm constantly observing people and absorbing, you know, like, what is it about what that man just did that made me go, something's not right here. Something seems off. And so you're constantly, you know, reading body language and reading, context clues that they're just bringing to the situation. So that's how we're trained to think, to spot, to look, for potential issues. And for the creative purposes of this book, it was really convenient.
Now, you also told Terry Gross, I think, that there was a common thing that you guys would see. Someone maybe drank a little bit too much before they boarded. Tell us about that.
Yes, the appropriate terminology appears to be intoxicated, is what we're supposed to say. Yeah, I mean, when you think about air travel, it's, you got a couple hundred strangers in an enclosed metal tube, a few miles up in the air, traveling a few hundred miles an hour. There's not much margin for error. So adding a passenger who appears to be intoxicated into this environment is not what we want. So we try to observe and trap that air before we close the door on that aircraft, because we can take care of it when it's on the ground. That's far better than handling it up in the air. De-escalation is one of the primary jobs of a flight attendant, but even better than de-escalation is avoiding a problem entirely.
Kick him out the door.
I turned to the gate agent and I'm like, can you help? So if not, just please.
Okay. And the question I kind of skipped, but I think it's good time for it now, is what's the most tense situation you've been in as a flight attendant?
Most tense situation. I think in that same interview with Terry Gross, I talked about the time that I had a woman who had a complete psychotic break on a flight, which was one of the more tense because it wasn't enough of a problem that we diverted, but it was just enough of a problem that it was right there on the edge, like it was right there. So for the entire 5-hour flight, we're dealing with a woman who is being physically aggressive, verbally aggressive, but not to the point that it warrants diverting the aircraft. But I've still got several hundred passengers, not several hundred, that's an overstatement of the size of aircraft we run, but there's a lot of passengers. And again, the margin of error is small. So if she was to go just one step further, we would have been having a completely different set of circumstances on our hands. And that's the way that flight attendants and pilots think constantly. We're constantly aware. I appreciate that most passengers are just kind of like, pilot. No, I did not mean that as a negative thing. It's just, most people are just along for the ride. But it's, we're constantly aware of if something goes sideways, our resources are limited and there's only so much that we can do up here.
There's only so many of you, right? There's
yeah.
Only 3-ish.
Depending on the size of the aircraft, yeah.
But now I know they can kick my ass if I'm certain something. Appeared to be intoxicated is the phrase. No, that was never, the only thing I've ever done is not want to shut down my Kindle. Back when they were making you do that, right? I didn't want to. I'm a sheep. Okay, so in the book, our flight attendant Jo, she's not my favorite character, by the way.
Who's your favorite character?
Give me one more question and then I'll tell you. Okay. Your favorite character, Jo, is helping passengers put on masks, and she says it's an intimate exercise. And this is a quote: "It was the eyes. The masks covered the passengers' faces. Jo couldn't tell if someone was smiling or frowning, if they were wrinkling their nose or sticking out their tongue, asking a question or yelling at her to watch out. Every action, every intention, every emotion was channeled through the eyes." It sounds like you had this experience, or are you writing maybe channeling from the pandemic?
So that was a really weird thing. Like, that whole passage existed before the pandemic, but it existed, but far less detailed from before the pandemic. And then 2020 I was editing this and working on this book through all of 2020 and everything that was. And when I got to that part, when I was writing about once the passengers put on the oxygen mask, and it was a weird experience to be like, I don't know what that's like, to channel everything you have through the eyes and to be in a situation that is perilous, that we've all been through for the past year, and to have that only communication be from here up. And it did. That paragraph got a little more fleshed out over the last year. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it stuck out to me. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, smizing. Okay, so my favorite character is not the pilot, who's compromised, although he's pretty great, or his wife or children, who are in lots of danger, although they're adorable, obviously, and loving, or the young FBI agent who might lose his career trying to stop this attack. Hot. We're gonna cast the film here in a second. Very hot with many T's. Or the fierce flight attendant, Joe, who only thinks of doing what she can to keep the passengers alive. In the meantime, it's Big Daddy. Big Daddy is my favorite character. Tell me about Big Daddy. Where did he come from? And is he in this room? Is there a Big Daddy? I'm looking at you, sir. Maybe, no? No. You're the only flight crew male in this room. So one more? Big Daddy? Anybody? No. Okay. Tell me about Big Daddy.
I love Big Daddy too, but Big Daddy, all the flight attendants are completely fictitious characters, 100% fictitious characters. But that being said, I do think that there is something about the flight attendant personality that attracts the types of personalities that are attracted to the job are naturally just larger than life anyway. And it's been so funny to hear a lot of responses to the book from flight crews, from people who have flown, who say things like, I know Big Daddy. Oh, I've flown with Big Daddy. I know exactly who that is.
Describe him a little bit so people who haven't read the book will.
Sure. Big Daddy is obviously not his real name. His real name is Michael Rodenberg, but everybody knows him as Big Daddy, and everybody at Coastal Airways knows Big Daddy.
Is he big?
No, he's tiny, and but his personality is not tiny. And he is the type of flight attendant that can get away with murder. He can say and do basically whatever he wants, and people just don't know what to do about it. And that's definitely a flight attendant trait. That there's some flight attendants where you go, if I said that, I would be fired so fast. But no, you get a letter, of recommendation. It's so. He's one of those types of flight attendants, and he's just a capital F, capital A flight attendant. That's what he does. He lives to be on the plane. He lives for the job. He lives for layovers, and that's who he is to his core. And there's a lot of flight attendants that are like that, that are just,
She looked at you. I saw
it.
We're casting later on.
That's right. We're going to cast the movie here in a second. I just love their relationship. Their friendship it seemed genuine to me, and it was funny. There was some comedy in their relationship. All right, so let's cast the movie. Now, I know there's going to be an actual movie. You have no control over the actual movie, right? I don't know. Maybe you have control over the movie. Who would you love to see be? Any character that you have in mind, like any character, you're like, yeah, I'd love to see this actress or actor play that character.
So I get asked this a lot, and I've never been able to come up with good answers, because when I feel like I've already cast this entire story with the completely, made up people in my head, because when I started writing this, like my only goal was just like, boy, if I work really hard, maybe I can get this published. Like the idea of like a movie deal was, those worlds, like I still can't say, like it is so far beyond anything that I ever dreamed would happen, that I feel like maybe some people write their stories, with like, oh, Harrison Ford that or something. No, I have just the fake people in my mind. So now trying to recast it into actual actors, I'm really struggling with it, because it's like, no, really, I'm very, and I'm finding it more interesting to see who some people they would cast. My friend Allie, actually, she wrote me the other day with like, okay, I've cast the whole thing here.
Allie, have you cast the whole thing? Javier, get your butt out of the way. Thank you.
The most important person is Big Daddy, and has to be
And for people on the Zoom that couldn't hear it, she said that the most important character that she has cast and has to be is Leslie Jordan. And I I'm fine with that casting. I think that would be lovely.
He would be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about the FBI agent? Hottie.
Okay, so I was trying to be realistic about who would say yes to this movie.
Was that a
Denzel Washington's son, now I can't remember.
John David
He was in Klansman.
Washington?
Yeah. He was
Okay.
in Klansman
Denzel Washington's son
Washington's son as the.
as the
Thumbs up.
yes,
We're getting, okay.
as
Doing
the
some
attractive,
group casting here. Yeah.
the attractive attractive.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very good.
Joe, I said it's Jada Pinkett.
Show is Jada Pinkett Smith.
Jada Pinkett Smith. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lots of heads nodding up to that. See,
What
I
about-
love this. I love this because sometimes I'll get like, somebody will say some actor and I'll be like, really? That character came off like that to you? Interesting. And then I try to like go back and figure out like what in my character description would have made them go that way.
What about the pilot?
Timothy Oliphant.
Oh, Timothy Oliphant.
Oh, we got guests.
Everybody in this movie is going to be
Guests
hot.
in that.
Everybody. This is going to be a very sexy movie. All right. Good job. Good job. Let's see. So you have, you said, possibly also to Terry Gross, a secret ability from your training to see what people are going to order in the service that you're providing online, on air. What would I order?
Yeah, it's like a flight attendant party trick that we're very good at, just like meeting someone and being like, Sprite. You can like Diet Coke, light ice, you can just like tell what people, it's a weird flight attendant party trick that's really completely useless. Although I did have somebody, I did make the connection that actually what it is you're just like reading all the context clues of what a person is and how they're presenting and what that is. So someone suggested, and I thought that's great. I'm actually going to steal that. The next, for book 2, I've actually been employing this where it's like, if I'm coming up with a character, one of the first things that I ask is, what would their drink be?
Oh,
Yeah. And then it just like fills in the blanks of like
reverse
what,
engineering your
right,
character.
reverse engineering your character. Exactly.
It had to do with geography, I think, too, right? Didn't you say it's
And
something?
geography, yep. You start to know your routes. Like I know that if I'm flying out of Boston, I know that my tea is depleted and I know that my seltzer is gone. And I also know that Boston has the good ice. So it's you get to know like weird,
The good ice?
good ice. Yeah. Flight attendants, again, we're full of useless information that's just really applicable in only one place.
I love that Boston is the T.
It's very appropriate.
I mean,
Yeah.
Historically. right?
Historically, yeah, exactly.
So,
So for
Chicago, let's do Chicago first.
Chicago does a lot of soda, just a lot of soda. Pop, I'm sorry. I'm
Pop.
so sorry. That I didn't mean to be offensive to Chicago. Pop, I know it's pop, I know better. So a lot of pop going in and out of Chicago.
So what did I order tonight that they're gonna bring me as soon as they hear that I'm ready for it, Kristen?
I would put you, if you're going at, I would say G&T. Are you a gin and tonic?
No,
No?
not too far off. Dr. Pepper's good. Hey, Big Daddy. I knew it.
So what are you?
Moscow Mule.
Oh,
They have
okay.
Moscow Mules downstairs ready for me for when I'm ready to drink.
See, that's a little bit of a trick question though, because I was working with a very basic bar cart.
Sorry. Well,
We're going
G&T's
like-
not far off, right? From a Moscow Mule, like the lime
Vodka lime,
situation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give it to you.
I'm out of practice. I'm rusty.
I
haven't
know.
used it
Now that you're big time writer and not.
right now.
Yeah.
it's exciting.
So you spent some time. Sorry. You spent some time, not in Chicago, but near Chicago and visiting Chicago. Tell me about some of your favorite Chicago spots. Like you're a Chicagoan-ish. Like we'll give it to you. You're a Chicagoan. You're hometowning right now. What do you like about Chicago? What's your favorite Chicago like tourist location?
I just drove past Wrigley earlier today, and it was, yeah, as a baseball lover, like I was immediately like on the windows, you know, like taking pictures as like the car was driving past.
So that's all changed.
That's
Oh, sorry. You were talking earlier about everything is changing, everything's different in Chicago. Like,
Right.
no wonder you think everything is changing. Like, you drove past Wrigley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
different.
Very different.
Very different, yeah. What I love about Chicago, and I went to school south of Chicago, and everybody from my school was from Chicago. And when I moved here to go to school, it was, I was saying earlier, it was like a big education of like, wow, you guys like Chicago. Like it is like people love, I never experienced that sort of like hometown pride as Chicagoans have, and it's so beautiful and so wonderful. And I love how, I was actually just thinking today, I was driving by Gene and Jute's, that's the hot dog place, and I'm not allowed to have ketchup, right? Is that what it is? Okay, yeah, exactly. Like heads are going up and down. It's like, I love that about Chicago. And Chicago people, where it's like, there's certain like no-go things where it's like, you can get a hot dog, but you cannot have ketchup. If you do, it's like, you're out of here. So I love that.
They'll let you have it,
They'll let you have it,
but they're
it's
gonna look at
come.
you real hard.
Yeah, you're gonna get looks, yeah. So it's, I love that. I love sort of that neighborhoody feel to Chicago of just, yeah. Your obsession with your sports, which I just love.
You are technically on South Side soil right now. So I don't know. Are there Sox fans here who are now mad at her? No. Okay. You're lucking out here.
And I love Comiskey or whatever it's called now. What is it? It's Comiskey, right? It's whatever, yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to say it.
It's a great park. I enjoy it. All the games that I saw there were wonderful.
Guaranteed something.
Guaranteed rate.
Guaranteed rate.
Oh, it's
Park.
even changed from the last thing that I
Yes.
Yeah, it used to be the
Yes.
cell. Used to be
So
something different.
It's still Comiskey, it's still Sears Tower, right? Like, we're just keeping it.
yes.
Didn't you just change the, yeah, the,
Hancock.
oh, you changed that too?
Lakeshore Drive.
Lakeshore Drive,
is
that's
now
what I knew.
Jean Baptiste.
Lakeshore Drive.
What's his last name?
DuSable.
Just DeSable. DeSable.
We're sticking
No
with
one's gonna
Lakeshore
say that.
Drive,
It's
right?
still Lakeshore Drive.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's still Lakeshore Drive.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hear Chicago hot dogs. Is that something that you're into? Okay. I was
Oh, no, you're
ask
gonna
you-
ask me about pizza.
I am gonna ask you about pizza. It is the right I have as a Chicagoan to ask you about Chicago pizza. What is are you pro?
I don't know how you can be against Chicago pizza. It's still, I mean, it's just, it's fantastic. And I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite, you know, Giordano's. Here's the Moscow Mules are mine. I'm good, thank you. Giordano's or Illuminati's, or who else are we working with here? Geno's. I don't think you can go wrong. It's, you know, it's all good. But we
Right.
did in our
Still pizza.
this was actually one of my favorite things about having Chicago layovers is there was a Giordano's right next to the hotel, and we would call and order pizza to be delivered to the hotel in the van ride from the airport to the hotel, so that we would get there as the pizza was being delivered, and we would take it upstairs, change out of uniform, and then have a room party with pizza and just inhale.
Just inhale it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it is a 45-minute pizza, so
Yeah.
you do have to make
Yes.
your plans accordingly. Yeah. I agree. Pizza is pizza. Right. So it's all good. I did hear a thin crust vote for Connie's over here, which I'll support, sir. Barely. So we have time for questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question? Not for me, for TJ. Yes, Susie.
What surprised you most as a debut author about the whole process of writing? What's been the biggest surprise for you?
Let me repeat the question. So the question is from Susanna Calkins, local Chicago author, who wants to know what has surprised you most about being a debut author? The process.
Yeah, like what's been surprising?
Sure, the publication process and also the, I think what surprised me, so this is the first book that I've taken this far, and I don't just mean like to publication, because clearly this is my first book, but I mean like this far in the process of like it is a complete story, and now I'm going to try to make it better and get it polished to where it's like as good as it can be. And I think in that it was the first book that I've taken this far, it was the first time I've also really surrendered in a way to the writing process. And I look back on it now and I wish I almost would have taken more notes as to how in the world I did this, because there were so, and maybe you just can't, because there were so many times that I would just not know what to do, and I'd sit down at my computer and all of a sudden it would be done. And not every day is like that, but everyone, no,
ma'am.
But I think it did surprise me that like every once in a while, those days would come where it was like, I just sat and all of a sudden I looked up and it's like, oh my God.
2 hours are gone.
2 hours are gone, and where did they go? And how did I get all these pages? And I solved that plot hole. How did that happen? Like, I know that's not most days, but I think that was surprising to me, that like to have that faith and surrendering into this world that I believed in and wanted to bring to life. And I told myself, I kind of have this thing that I say to myself, I don't think I've ever said this out loud to anyone before. I kind of have this thing that I say to myself every time I sit down to write, which is like, I remind myself that just to get out of the way, just to get out of the way and let this happen. And that doesn't happen every day, but in the times that I felt like I could get out of my own way, that was surprising, the sort of the magic that comes.
We're doing it wrong, Susie. I'm in my own way all the time.
I am too, 99% of the time. I'm only talking about those like couple of moments of magic where you're like, wow, this is easy. And then like 5 minutes later, you're like, this is impossible.
Please don't go into a room of writers and say this is easy. Ever again.
And with regards to like the publishing process, what was surprising about that is, I mean, I knew it would be hard. It's one of those things like, you know something, but until you go through it, you don't understand it. I knew it would be work. I knew it would be hard. I knew, but until I went through it, I didn't know how hard it would be. And this whole process has given me such deep, profound respect for anyone who brings the book to public, like who goes this far. It's just, it is so much work, and it is such a collaborative team effort, and it's just, I'm in awe of it. I'm absolutely in awe of it. And I was a bookseller, so I knew that aspect of it, but I didn't understand sort of what came after finished draft to book in hand, and seeing all that took. It's just,
And all these people, right? All these people who are helping you
yes,
make it better. It's not surprising.
it is surprising how many people are involved in this. And yeah, it's been a massive education. I feel like every day of the past however long this has been, I've just learned more than I ever thought possible.
Okay. Other questions? Javier?
I've heard so changing hands. Is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything that you received or
Okay, let me repeat the question, if I can.
Sure.
Javier, the owner, half of the owner of this bookstore, Exile in Bookville, Chicago's newest bookstore, wants to know basically the differences, like from being on this side of the bookseller. You were a bookseller to begin with. How many years did you work at changing hands?
Just not long enough. The answer is not long enough, because the opportunity to fly came up. So I was in New York pursuing a career in theater, and failing at that miserably. And so I left that and I moved back home to Phoenix, and moved literally back home, back in with my parents, and did the whole, mid-20s and don't know what I want to do with my life, and I'm living in my childhood bedroom. Isn't this fun? Routine, which is a ton of fun. And that's when I got a job at Changing Hands. And that's when I found that I was able to be creative again in a way that was not as scary as putting myself out there into into the world, like pursuing your dreams in New York and theater in front of all of your friends and family, and then having them say, what have you been cast in? And maybe like the brunch shift at the restaurant I work at.
I'm a star.
I'm a star of Sunday brunch. So my time there, this is a roundabout way to say that booksellers hand sell author, like we find books that we love and then we hand sell them to the people that come into the store. And that's, you know, what makes a book a success, are the booksellers that get the books into, I made this connection very recently, which is strange, but it's like, you think publication is the end point, like a published book. No, it's not. The end point is getting that book into a reader's hands and getting them to read it. And the people that take the book over the finish line, that final step, are booksellers. And I never fully made that connection that when I hand sold an author's book to someone in the bookstore, I was hand selling someone's dream and something that they had worked on and something that they had worked on. And I think I have such a deeper appreciation for that. I think that has changed my perspective of that, that it's like, we think, you know, it's, at least for me, I just didn't make that leap of connection, of knowing like, oh, I love this writer, but this writer is also like, I'm helping make this writer's dream happen. And that has been really fun to have that perspective.
Okay, so we have some questions from our audience at home. I just saw that my drink order had been heard. Thank you, Kristen. Let's see. Kyle Blair wants to know, did TJ's theater experience training help her in the writing creation of characters for the book?
I would say absolutely. It's weird. I'm now at like this point in this journey, which is like full circle in like 5 different ways. And at the time, nothing seemed necessarily like it made sense. I was just kind of moving forward with things that made sense in that moment. But in the big picture of things, I was just kind of like, feeling at this, why am I studying this? What has happened? You know, and I look now and I go, oh my God, everything literally like fell into place to come to this moment. And my musical theater background absolutely played a massive role in character development, and I even took it from, you know, in a sort of a in-between step onto the plane. I say this all the time, you know, people would ask me if I enjoyed being a flight attendant and if I miss being like creative, and I'm like, I don't think you understand, like it's this, I get a tremendous amount of creative satisfaction from being a flight attendant. When you look at it, like a flight is very theatrical. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's full of characters that are literally in costume. They literally have lines to say. There's almost always some sort of inciting incident or conflict or drama. You have a set period of time in which you can resolve this problem, and it's all improvisation in between. There's lights, there's sounds. I mean, like literally, it's a very theatrical experience. And each day you get a new cast of characters to put on these shows with. So I think that my musical theater lens that I just naturally view the world through anyway, combined with that world, just somehow morphed into taking my dream from changing hands in childhood into being here in Chicago with all of you and all of you. It's weird.
I like the idea of the fight being a performance, but I'm picturing as one of those audience participation, you know, like Tina and Tony's Wedding or whatever that show used to be. Yeah, everybody's involved whether they like it or not. One more question online, but if any other viewers have questions, type them into the chat. What advice would you give to an aspiring author?
Keep going. That's the number one thing that I can look back at what I did and think that was the most valuable thing that I did, was just keep going. I didn't know what I was doing. I taught myself the whole way along the way. I read incessantly and tried to watch other people do it better and then figure out how they did it so well, and then figure out how to take those tools and try to do it myself. But I think that within that process, keep going is the only thing that I would say. You're at least with my experience, I kept waiting for the time when I felt like, oh, now I get it, or now it seems easy, or now, you know, I know what I'm doing, or now this is working. No, that's never going to come. At least not in my experience. It's never going to get to the point that at least I haven't hit it yet where I feel comfortable and feel like I know what I'm doing. So to me, it's just like, keep going. And if you don't know how to do something, just learn. I literally had a graduate level creative writing textbook that became sort of like, I call it like my brain workout that I would do before I would start to write. I would sort of just like leaf through it, just remind, like, you know, okay, these are the basics. This is, don't forget these things. And then once I sort of was in that frame of mind, then I get to work. And so remembering those basics and then just continuing to repeat them, just keep going.
I had another question. This is from, it's me. Curtis wants to know, Curtis Kelch. Sometimes
Hi,
these are friends
Curtis.
of yours, so I just want to make sure you knew they were here. TJ, absolutely loved Falling. It's not a question, Curtis. I wanted to know how you wrote such gripping chapters where at the end of each chapter there was a cliffhanger that kept you reading. To me, this was a near perfect book. Thank you, Curtis. Are you single, Curtis? For being your first effort, this seems crazy.
Thank you, Curtis. That's incredible. That's actually something that, you know, in all of 2020, when I was really working on this book with my agent, Shane Salerno, that was something, he has a screenwriting background, and that was something that he helped me focus in on, was how do you make every single chapter, you know, pop in and pop out? Like, how do you start a chapter to where the reader has to keep going, and how do you end a chapter so that the reader has to turn the page? And so I looked at every single one of those moments, and if it wasn't up to snuff, if it wasn't to the point that it felt like that, then I kept working and kept, you know, working on it until I got it right. And for me, like a overarching mantra that I had through this entire writing process was pacing. And that's sort of like relentless from the first sentence to the last sentence, like just lightning speed pacing was like just what I kept reminding myself. And sort of one of the last tools that I employed was that sort of like punch in, punch out at the beginning and end of every chapter. So thank you for enjoying that aspect.
I think that's all. Were there any other questions here in the room? Yes, sir.
Were your friends, family, coworkers, like aware you were working on this first? And secondly, what was the reaction when you found out, oh, I just signed this book deal, it's a movie deal, like, oh, yeah, I'm going on a book tour, like.
I'm never going to be able to ask that question into the microphone with all the gestures and the voice. But the question is, TJ, were your friends and family and coworkers aware that you were doing this project, and what was their reaction when there was a big deal and a movie deal? Am I close? Yes, okay.
No, I told people on a very, very much a need to know basis. Remember, I had come off of abject failure in New York, and so putting myself out there creatively felt very scary. And so writing was my way to still be creative, but privately, just for me. So I did not even tell like my parents, like my family, that I was working on something until it was to the point that they were ready to stage an intervention, because they thought I was leading a double life or something. Because like I'd come home on my days off and just like disappear into my house and be like, don't call me, I'll call you, and I'm not gonna call you. So I basically had to explain what I was doing. And so on like a need to know basis, I told people, like I said earlier, if I had to let some pilots know so that I could get feedback. And then when I started, you know, looking for an agent, I had to like, so like little by little, some people got let in, but I kept it very, very private because I was embarrassed for one thing, and I wasn't confident in it. I was confident in it. I wasn't confident in me and what I was doing. So it just felt safer and easier to just go at it on my own. So cut to when it actually becomes something and comes to fruition, and suddenly it's a very public announcement that there's a 2-book deal, and a week later a movie deal, and I'm getting all of these text messages and calls from like very close friends and family who are like, oh my God, congratulations, this is so exciting. You wrote a book? Like, nobody knew that I was doing this really. So that was one of the craziest days of my life, just fielding all these text messages of like, do we need to do, what else don't we know about you?
That's hilarious. I think we are, oh, good. One more question.
You said you tried to document one day on the plane and it's running bush for yourself. And now you've got the second book and it's sort of like the opposite process, like the book is coming or is the process now for you to write the second book very different than
Even your question made me nervous for you. Okay, the question is, you wrote the book kind of in secret, kind of on the plane, then all the happened, and you have a 2-book deal. So let me just ask it my way. What's next for you? What are you working on next? What do you feel comfortable telling us? And how is it different?
How is it different from the first time around? I'm actually trying to, it's a lot to have a 2-book deal, to be doing this under very different circumstances. Like you said, the first time I did it, it was just for me and it was very private, and the circumstances have definitely changed. It's a little more public now. But to sort of, I'm playing it just as close to the chest, the second book, as I did the first book. Like nobody really knows what that is, and that's a way that I'm sort of trying to reclaim sort of that feeling of safety a little bit, of like, look, I can write a terrible chapter and awful characters that are ultimately going to get cut, but nobody needs to know. That's just going to be for me to know, and I'll take care of it on my own. So I'm playing those sort of like mental games to work on it, because it's a lot. Yeah.
Did you plot it?
But like I said, I'm trying different tactics and techniques, and we're learning. It's a whole learning. I feel like this whole thing has just been the most wild learning experience about the industry, about, I've never done anything like this before. So this is all a learning experience, and to include, trying to do this process again and see what works this time and what didn't work last time, and to get rid of that and try new things.
Excellent. I think we are done. Any more hands in the air? Yes.
You mentioned the graduate.
Okay, the question is, TJ mentioned that she had a textbook that she was sort of keeping at.
Definitely would. It's like, you can go to my house and see it, and it's like Post-it notes everywhere and dog-eared and highlighted and underlined. It was just like a very straightforward way of saying, let's break down a concept such as POV. Let's talk about this, and here are examples of how it's done well. It was just a very practical book that for some reason, just for me, like really just worked for me. And trying to remember Janet Burroway. Janet Burroway is the writer. Yeah, I think it's creative nonfiction. I think it's a very basic title.
It's creating something fiction, some adjective by Janet Burroway. It is very much like the textbook you would get at an MFA program, or maybe even an undergraduate creative.
Right. It's like basics, but it's like basics said in just a way that for whatever reason at the time that they came to me, they just clicked for some reason, and they just became my building blocks. And it's sort of like my safety blanket that I go back to if I ever feel like, why is this scene not working? Then I'll go back and be like, oh, that's why. Okay.
One last question from me. You were a bookseller for a while. What's a book that you love to hand sell to people, even now? Do you have a favorite that you like to shove on people or give as gifts?
Yes.
She hasn't read that yet.
So my favorite thing to do as a bookseller, now I do it all the time, and I always say like once a bookseller, always a bookseller. I can't tell you how many times I'd be on the plane doing like a beverage service, and you know, I'd be making them their Diet Coke or whatever, and they'd have their book out, and I'd say, oh, what are you reading? And we get like, you know, 5-minute long conversation about that, then, you know, hand selling them the next thing they need to read. So it never really goes away. But I always love to say when people are like, oh, what's your, I'm like, well, what do you want? What kind of experience are you looking for? And then depending on, oh, I'm super stressed out, you know, and I just need something to like escape to. Okay, well, do you want like, you know, the high blood pressure escape, or do you want just like your Nicholas Sparks, like romance? Is it like, what are you looking for? And so just trying to tailor it to, so I feel like I have like my go-tos and like each sort of mood, if you will. But everything's you know, I've certainly have times where it's like you read a book and you're just like, this was not the right book for this moment. Yes. I'm not ready to receive this. Yeah.
I'm not ready to receive this is a great way. No, I agree. I do the same thing. Even like, I don't like to review books because I'm like, even if it wasn't for me in this moment, it could be perfect for somebody else.
Exactly. And books that have spoken to other people, and they're like, you have to read this. And then I read it, I'm just like, it's not my thing. It's not, you know, so that's the beautiful thing about books. There's tons of them. Enough for everybody.
Awesome. Okay. Kristen says she's gonna close it down from there. Javier is gonna close it down from here. So we can put the microphones down.
Yes, so everyone on Zoom, thank you so much for your patience while we try and navigate how to create these hybrid events. So thank you to TJ and Lori and to all of you for watching. We have plenty of copies, signed copies of Falling and of Lori's books. So shoot us an email, give us a phone call, and we'd be happy to ship anywhere in the country. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much for your patience. You're talking to two people who are lucky if we can figure out how to do email. So we appreciate your patience with all of the technology, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation. And visit us at exileandbookville.com. And again, tons of copies, signed copies. And our email is books@exileandbookville.com if you'd like to place an order. Thank you again, everyone. And again, for your patience, and have a nice evening.